welcome to this very special conversation. This is coming in from the aviation space. Now, time and again, we've spoken over the last year how the aviation space is possibly come out of the woods as far as the COVID-19 pandemic is concerned, but there is still a growth trajectory that is needed as far as going back to the pre-pandemic levels. Today, we're in conversation with Boeing India's head, Salil Gupte, who's been kind enough to take out the time and join us. Salil, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Salil, as I said, over the last 1 year, we've spoken about how the aviation space is out of the woods, but possibly there is still miles to go as far as getting those numbers that will make the aviation players extremely confident. So let's begin with that. What is your outlook as far as the Indian aviation market is concerned?
Well, the Indian aviation market has been a bright spot coming out of the pandemic, certainly.
Yeah.
Domestically, we're back above pre-pandemic levels in terms of traffic. Internationally, there's been significant growth on the recovery to pre-pandemic levels. And the Indian traveler, as everyone can see, has been traveling.
Yeah.
Airplanes are extremely full. The airlines have been doing very well. And that means that there is tremendous demand in the near term and long term for aviation in India as more and more of the Indian population moves towards flight as a primary mode of travel for holidays and for business. And so we are extremely optimistic on the growth of the Indian market, not just over the next few years, but over the next 20 years.
Okay. Salil, I want to now begin by understanding all that's been happening over the last couple of months. There's been a lot of shopping that's happening because the big deal with Air India that was finalized at the Paris Air Show, it was a firm order. It was seen as one of the biggest deals that have happened in the aviation space. Talk to us about that deal. Where do things currently stand? And how do you see that adding a fillip as far as the growth story of the Indian aviation space is concerned?
Absolutely. So some of the large deals that have been announced, and we've been honored to win our share of those with critical customers like, of course, Air India, who has signed up for 190 737 MAXs and then 20 787s, 10 777Xs. Plus, of course, the new startup here in India, Akasa, which just celebrated its first birthday since operations a few days ago. Placed an order for 72 aircraft, topped it up a little bit at the Paris Air Show, and continues to grow. Those are key examples of Indian aviation's growth over the medium to long term. Because while those numbers were big, they are a fraction of the over 2,400 airplanes that are going to be coming into this region over the next 20 years. And so while those orders are some of the largest ever, some of the greatest opportunities are yet to come as India becomes the third largest civil aviation market in the world this decade.
So Salil, would it be fair to then say that do you feel that there is still a potential in the Indian aviation space that is largely untapped with new players like Akasa, as you rightly pointed out? They've placed an order for about 4 aircraft, if I understand that correctly. How do you see that association going forward?
Well, of course, Akasa is a good example. In addition to their original purchase of 72, they placed an order for 4 additional. But Akasa is a startup that has been one of the fastest growing startups in the history of aviation.
Under 5% market share now.
Well, but they've been adding. They've gone up to 20 airplanes in only a year. And so that's never been done before. So that's tremendous rate of growth. And they've flown over 4 million passengers during that time. And that shows you what's possible in India. With the ecosystem here of pilots, of MRO that is going to be required to support those startups as we go forward. Because we recognize that while there will be large players like Air India, like Indigo, like players that have been around for many years like SpiceJet, that will continue to grow in the Indian market, startups like Akasa do have opportunities as the middle class in India continues to take to the skies. Generally speaking, we see aviation growing in line with GDP. In India, it's actually growing a little bit faster than that. And we see aviation in this market growing at above 7% over the next several years. And that's going to mean that there's going to be a tremendous opportunity, not just for the large carriers, but for startups like Akasa as well.
But Salil, what is also interesting and concerning at the same time is while you do have a great potential story coming in with the large orders that we are seeing, on the other end of the spectrum as far as the Indian aviation space is concerned, there are certain airlines that have been grounded. We don't know whether they'll take to the skies again or not. For example, what we saw with Go Airways, yes, they've gotten a green light, but we still don't have a date as to when the operations will finally begin. We've seen what's happened with Jet Airways. There was a change of management, but you just couldn't take off. SpiceJet, unfortunately, is seeing a reduction as far as the market share is concerned. How do you see those, because these are not bottle challenges anymore, they're becoming big concerns because, as I said, the market for the Indian aviation space is so huge. Do you think these are now being seen as concerns that could potentially harm the potential going forward?
I think whenever an airline is grounded or goes out of business, it's sad for so many of the stakeholders.
Sure.
It's sad for the employees, of course, for the passengers who'd book tickets on that airline, for all of the stakeholders of the airline. And so we never like to see that happen. And we, of course, support all of our airline customers to ensure their health and their success. That's our goal. As an airplane OEM, Boeing, we can only succeed when our customers succeed.
Sure.
And so as you look at, say, a SpiceJet, we, of course, strongly support them as they resume and return to growth here in the months and years to come.
Sure.
We, of course, would love to see one of our largest global customers previously, Jet Airways, come back and take to the Indian skies. That would be a tremendous story for Indian aviation. And with Go Air, it's simply too early to tell to see how that's going to play out. Of course, they're not our customer at this point.
Sure.
But overall, I would view a situation like Go Air as not indicative of the overall long-term trend of Indian aviation.
Okay.
The long-term trend of Indian aviation is still for growth. It's never a straight line. There are always small blips, but overall, the trend line is unchanged.
Okay. I want to talk about some elephants in the room as well. There are some concerns that have been raised as far as the FAA is concerned, as far as certain engines with the Boeing 737 MAX. Would Boeing want to respond to those?
Oh, I believe you're referring to an advisory issued by the FAA a couple days ago regarding engine de-icing. These are directives that come out from the FAA from time to time.
Sure.
We, of course, make safety priority number one. And, of course, what we do when those come out is we work closely with the FAA to help the airlines address any of those in line with their advisory and in line with what they recommend. So we have a procedure in place to address all of those in the fastest, safest way possible.
Okay. Salil, now I want to talk to you as far as how big a market for Boeing is India. What is the kind of potential that you see going forward? I want to first begin with the kind of announcements that we've seen. I think there has been about 100 million that's been announced as far as infrastructure, pilot training and others are concerned. Why is Boeing so optimistic as far as the India story is concerned?
Well, India is a market like none other. It will be, as I mentioned, one of the largest aviation markets in the world, and it's the fastest growing at the moment, which means that you need a tremendous ecosystem to take care of all of these airplanes, to fly all these airplanes that are going to be coming in over the next 20 years. We estimate to fly those 2,400 airplanes, you will need 37,000 pilots. You will need about the same number, maybe a slightly larger number, of mechanics to maintain those airplanes. And we want to ensure that we're able to have the pilot training ecosystem here in India to train those pilots so they don't always have to leave Indian borders. And we believe that those investments have to be made now. So the investments that you're referring to, the $100 million in pilot training, that encompasses both hard infrastructure, simulators, and also curriculum to ensure that pilots for the Indian market can be trained in India.
Could you also talk to us if you have details of where these facilities would be coming up?
Well, we already have, absolutely.
Some in Noida and other areas.
Yes, we already have, of course, a simulator here in Noida.
Yeah.
And then we expect that where we're supporting, with some of this investment, we'll be supporting our customer Air India as they set up their facility here in the Delhi NCR region. But some of this infrastructure will be in other parts of the country as well. It's yet to be decided.
Okay. I want to now understand in terms of production plans as far as Boeing is concerned. Are we going to see increase of production as far as the Dreamliners or the 737 Maxes are concerned?
Well, I think we certainly are always evaluating our rates to meet the growing demand. On our latest earnings call, of course, we talked about increases in rates here for the 737 MAX as that narrow body demand continues to grow for the single aisle products. And this is driven by the growth of both large legacy carriers, but also the low-cost carriers that grow not only in India, but around the world. On the wide body side, the large aircraft, like you see here behind us, the 787-9, the 787 is by far the world's best-selling wide-body aircraft. And so that aircraft continues to be in great demand, not just in India, where Air India is going to be procuring it, but also you have the Saudi deal that was recently announced that was extremely prominent. And we're very excited about the 787-9 connecting parts of the world that were not connected previously. As you think about new technology airplanes like the 787, you're able to do more point-to-point flying. So you can, yes, fly to hubs like Heathrow or Dubai, but you can also connect smaller cities in Europe and India, or the US and India, or Southeast Asia and India in ways that you could not before aircraft like the 787.
So taking on from what you said, if we move from the India outlook to the global outlook, the Saudi deal, as you spoke about, there is one with Ryanair as well. Could you talk to us about what the global outlook is looking like?
So the global outlook at this point continues to be extremely strong. This is for global travel over the past year. For people going on holiday, this has been one of the busiest. And while there are, I think, some questions being asked about the macroeconomic slowdown you are seeing in some parts of the world as interest rates have, of course, increased to slow down inflation, you're not seeing that impact the demand for aviation quite yet. So generally speaking, our customer input, our customer order books remain extremely strong, and you continue to see demand for aviation products.
Yeah. Salil, I just want to understand, we spoke about the orders and the aircraft that are going to be incoming, but the criticism has been that while it makes for great optics, there are also real concerns as far as a backlog is concerned. Do you think that is impacting the kind of potential that we are still seeing between players? Is that a real concern for Boeing today?
Well, I think the backlog of aircraft that have been ordered for Boeing and our competitors is clearly an indication of how much demand there is in the market. And our goal is to deliver that backlog as quickly as we can, but maintaining a stable supply chain. And this has been, of course, a big topic of discussion in the industry as we've recovered from the pandemic, is when will the supply chain be able to come back to health to support the on-time delivery of these aircraft that are in the backlog today. And it will continue to take more time. It's, as we've said, it's going to be a few more years before we reach pure supply chain health. But I think the way that we handle that is via transparency. We're transparent in two ways on the supply chain. One is with the supply chain itself, to share with them the demand we're seeing from our customers and what that means for them in terms of their production rates and what they need to be ready for. Similarly, the minute we hear of any issue in the supply chain that could affect our customers, we're very transparent with them on what that means so they can prepare in partnership with us. I think that transparency flowing both ways is the only way to go. And over time, we're seeing the supply chain heal itself and adjust to these increased demand for aviation products coming out of the pandemic.
Okay. So as I wrap the discussion, I want to go back to something we started with, which is Boeing's bet as far as India is concerned, the Make in India story. Recently, when the Prime Minister was in a visit to the United States, out of all the leaders that he met the Boeing head as well. Could you talk to us about what can we expect between the Boeing and Make in India story as we go forward? Because that has been a key focus as far as the Prime Minister is concerned, that if we can produce and manufacture locally, then the potential is going to be tapped to its maximum.
Absolutely. Boeing is by far the leading foreign OEM in terms of manufacturing here in India. We have over 5,000 employees here now, which is adding 1,000 a year over the last number of years. We have over $1 billion of exports from India each year, of which 2/3 is actually manufacturing. And so as you look at every Boeing airplane, there's a little bit of India on it. As a matter of fact, this 787-9, the floor structure is from Nagpur. The 737 MAX tail fin is from Hyderabad. So there's just a tremendous amount of growth in manufacturing that we are doing here in India, and we expect that to continue in the years to come because Indian capability is growing, not just at the largest industrials, which of course are strong partners of ours, but even at the smallest MSMEs. And that's what makes India an extremely vibrant manufacturing ecosystem as well.
That's an optimistic note to end this conversation with. Salil, thank you so much for taking out the time and joining us here.
Pleasure as always.